Customers know roughly what they want. They don't know the solution, but they absolutely know what they don't want. So if you build something that doesn't satisfy their motivations or needs, it will fail. You absolutely have to be thinking about that next step for customers because they've already decided what they want, or more crucially, what they don't want. You have to be rounded. You have to see the challenge or opportunity from all of your stakeholders' eyes, not just the customers. You've got to understand the motivations and needs of your customers and the specific segments within your customer base.
Welcome to the B2B Experience, brought to you by Biglight, one of Europe's leading experience design agencies. In this podcast series, we speak to digital pioneers in B2B and tell real stories of breaking down barriers and delivering change.
I'm Steve Borges, and my guest today is Tim McIver.
Hello, Steve.
Welcome. You've had over 20 years experience in digital commerce across B2C and B2B, ton of experience, of course, lots of roles where you've driven change as well. And I know you're passionate about the role of culture in making that change successful. So I'd like to get into all of that with you over the next period of time. But I was intrigued when we spoke the other day that you actually began your career in credit risk. So I thought it would be good to start our conversation there. So how did you get into that? How did that come about?
Well, surely that's the logical starting place for anyone who goes into customer experience. No, it was by chance, as some really good things often are. So I just completed a degree and returned home and started working at Orange, the mobile telecoms company. And in the bank of desks adjacent to the job I was doing with the credit risk team. So I would constantly eavesdrop on what they were talking about and was really intrigued by their use of data to drive decisions, but actually to see that in action as well. So the more time I spent listening to them, the more interested I became, and I convinced them that they needed me in their team, and somehow managed to move that bank of desks to the left and join them, and spent a good 3 or 4 years getting that background behind credit risk, what it meant, the different influences that were behind that. So that was my first real exposure to kind of high volume consumer activity, albeit from the kind of gamekeeper perspective, because often the answers were, we can't accept you because, but it was all data driven, and that really interested me.
What you did go on to do was join the Trainline. Is that right? I'm not sure if that's the next job or not. I know there's one in between, but
Yeah, so I took my baseline understanding of credit risk and moved into a managerial position at On Digital, which later became ITV Digital, and that kind of formed, as I was going through the preparation for this conversation, a lot of the roles that I'd taken have been the first roles of their type in an organization, and quite often the challenger position. So when I joined On Digital, it was super fast growth, challenger business, taking on the behemoth that was Sky and really wanted to grow very quickly. And I came in with my credit risk hat on to say, actually, we're probably going to have to not say yes to 25% of the people who are applying because we're giving them a £300 set-top box and we don't know where they live. So that formed a level of steeliness, if you like, within me, because I was one person in an organization that was hell-bent on growing really quickly, that had the perception that I was going to slow that down. So that challenger position has determined quite a lot of what I've done going forward, but also that second part about setting up new departments and new disciplines within businesses is really what has driven me.
let's talk about your move into digital, which and that passion for digital, I know, still drives you today. So what was it about that role, and what was it about when you discovered digital that really engaged you?
Yeah, so I stepped into a number of different roles at the Trainline. So initially joining to help them with some fraud management on the background of my credit risk work. Um, and the Trainline was, I mean, looking back, was a fantastic opportunity. A new organization trying to truly revolutionize a very staid, very large, very historic industry in the rail industry. So they pushed very, very hard to digitize that experience and move purchases from the train windows into initially websites and then into apps. And just that kind of, again, that transition and transformation, trying to take on the status quo, I think was a huge appeal there. And when I started looking in that digital space at the turn of the century, it was still relatively in its infancy. So again, that was interesting. It was new, it was challenging, and to a certain extent, there was no rule book either. There was no playbook for how this was going to be successful. So really trying to work out what the next step was as you arrived at the next step. That was quite exciting. And I really enjoyed that.
I remember you saying to me a few weeks ago that it was experimentation before we even knew that was a thing.
I'd like
Can
to
you
say it was all planned out, but no, it was let's try this and see if it works.
give me an example of something in that environment where you tried something and it worked and you didn't expect it to?
I think probably one of the bigger ones was the push away from queuing up to collect your ticket to the introduction of the self-service ticket machines. Now there's suddenly these 6 foot by 3 foot boxes started appearing on station concourse. And you'd spent quite a lot of money on your train ticket, and all you had was a 6 or 7 digit alphanumeric code that you would key into a machine. So trying to convince our customers that A, it was trustworthy, B, it was going to work, and C, there was someone to help you, all of which you just transacted through a website, it was a punt to start off with. There's no doubt about it. And against the friction within the rail station where everything was orientated towards the ticket window, we took a leap as an organization at that point. And, we've subsequently gone on to barcode tickets on your mobile. So the physical ticket is removed. But that step just away from the more conventional customer journey was a huge change at the time. Doesn't seem so transformational now, but it certainly was then.
So that's the kind of what you did when you were there. But I know that because we've had this conversation before, that the cultural side of things is very important to you. Reflecting on that particular environment, what was it about that culture that made it so successful and so engaging?
Yeah. So looking back, you don't really appreciate how good things were when you were in the middle of it. But it was a pretty exciting time. And I think part of that comes from the fact that you're trying to change something that has been fundamentally set for decades, and you are a very small part of a very big industry. So having that, what I class as the straight line strategy, which was set by the board about what we were out to do, what we were trying to achieve, and everybody getting behind that, that was huge, because that then drove the right culture around delivery and change. And it was okay to make mistakes, because there are very few mistakes you can't roll back from. But let's try and keep going forwards all the time. It was a small group of people as well, so it was pretty much startup mode. So it had all of those exciting aspects that you can really drive change and drive change quickly with. And I think with that kind of environment, you get a certain mindset and a certain group of people who really want to drive that change. We had some great people in the business as well, and some great leaders. So kind of you wrap it up in all of that, then the culture that came out of that was great.
And you mentioned a straight line strategy. What do you mean by that?
It's been very, very clear about what the business is there to do and what it has to achieve. And you can fork off from that, but not too far, because the strategy is the strategy that's laid down. Everyone signs up to that. And the debate has already happened before the strategy is written. So, you've had your chance to chip in. But that's what it is, and that's what we're here as business to do. And get on board, or thank you very much, this isn't right for you. It sounds harsh, but actually in practice, it was brilliant, because there was no ambiguity, which meant there was still opinions, but there was less debate about those opinions. You discussed them. Did it stack back to the straight line strategy? Yes or no? Yes, get on and do it. No, we're not doing it.
Moving on from the Trainline, you moved more into e-com. Well, I suppose Trainline is e-com, but physical goods type of e-commerce. So how did that come about?
Yeah, so I'd always kept an eye on what was happening in retail, because it is one of the most dynamic industries out there, governed by week on week, month on month, year on year sales, and the frenetic nature that comes with that. And again, being in that startup mentality at the Trainline, I really enjoyed that kind of atmosphere. So I kind of, there was a spell in there where I tried financial services, but very quickly retreated back to the retail space because of its dynamic nature, and joined River Island to create their first customer experience team. We all know River Island from the high street and more recently from the press, but it's a great business. And I really enjoyed that entrepreneurial spirit that business had because it was family owned, and because the owner, who was 90 something at the time, would come in a couple of times a week, was still very much hands on. The family were involved throughout. That was a great organization to work for, and they were going through their transition from the high street bricks and mortar approach to recognizing that you had to be at least multi-channel, if not over-indexing on the digital side of things. So the CIO at the time was doing a whole platform re-engineering, moving to a microservices architecture, which again was fantastic to be involved in. But you still, because it's retail, you have to keep moving forward. So that was another great experience for me, and it started to bring together the customer experience aspects of it with technology and increasingly with digital, because that was into the 35% of sales. Felt like overnight for the organization, but it was really where customers were driving. They were expecting and demanding a multi-channel experience from you. And if it wasn't good, they would go somewhere else, because the one thing about retail is choice is infinite. If you don't get it right, there's someone else who absolutely will. So you've got to be on your game all of the time.
Very interesting. So two examples there you talked about. One is actually trying to change customer behavior in order to make the experience better for them, for customers. So the kiosks rather than and the other, responding to changing customer expectations. Which is the harder challenge?
I think they're both pretty hard. To be fair, I think if you recognize that there is a better way of doing something and you do it well enough and you can demonstrate the benefits to the customers, then they will move. There's no doubt about it. And typically that tends to be, you will make my life easier, you will make it more valuable. So if you can tick one or both of those boxes for a customer, you'll see that natural transition. But that's where the role of innovation comes in. You absolutely have to be thinking about that next step for customers, because they've already decided what they want, or more crucially, what they don't want. I remember joining an organization, and one of the senior leaders in there said rather colorfully to me, customers don't know what they want. And being a customer experience professional, I was aghast at the time. Said, well, absolutely they do. And they will tell us. And he gave a couple of examples, and I was like, okay, that's interesting. So I kind of softened my more militant view in that customers know roughly what they want. They don't know the solution, but they absolutely know what they don't want. So if you build something that doesn't satisfy their motivations or needs, it will fail.
Shall we move on to certainly the stage of your career where we first met, and that was Hobbycraft, and then eventually on the B2B side for Magnet Kitchens. So you worked with Biglight in both of those roles, which was it was great. I enjoyed working with you. So what are your reflections on this? What did you learn from working with us, for example?
Yeah, I think that one of the big takeaways was, I don't need to have the answers. Um, I can give that responsibility and that accountability to the experts, and in this case, it was you and your team, Steve. So I can set the problem or frame the opportunity, but I and my teams don't need to have the absolute solution. That's where we lean on experts like yourselves to come up with those solutions. And I think also the second point here is, when you're working in a business, you're fully immersed in it, and as much as you try to stay aware of what's happening, you do get biased by the internal demands. You block yourself off as to what you can and can't do. Where when you bring in, we brought in Biglight, and they said, well, why can't you? And then we came up with a whole load of reasons why, and quickly dispelled most of them. So I think it's that bringing the expertise in, but also having an organization to challenge some of the predefined assumptions that do exist in every business, just moves you forward faster.
Let's talk about culture, let's talk about, without naming any names, of course, you will have worked for lots of individuals within lots of organizations. You've described with some warmth, I would say, the culture at the Trainline. We touched on that. But let's just reflect across those experiences. If you could pick out, in the context of delivering change, what are the aspects of the culture that can, well, let's start off with aspects of the culture that stymie that change, that stop the organization moving at the pace it could move?
Yeah, sure. So when I first joined River Island, the CEO Ben Lewis pulled me aside, and he knew that I was in there to drive this customer agenda and change. And he gave me a great quote, which was, "Tim, we know you've got to change, but respect the past, but don't be beholden to it." And I thought that was brilliant, because any organization that has been around for a while clearly has done lots of things really, really well. Otherwise, you don't survive. So if you're going through with a change agenda, recognize that there are some really, really good things that that business has done and achieved, and maintain them. But equally, if you stay still, you will become obsolete pretty quickly, and even more rapidly nowadays, with the advent of technological change. So don't be beholden to it, I think, was his way of saying, we've got a lot of people who are highly tenured and have had a lot of success in the past, but the world has changed. So it's that kind of, this doesn't really apply to River Island, because it was pretty entrepreneurial in its spirit, but it's what I kind of ungratefully describe as the fat middle. And it's that group of middle management, or people who are highly tenured, who have always done something a particular way, and no doubt it has proved successful for a while, but are just not open to change. And that's either out of fear. So change can sometimes mean, well, this is my job on the line, or know-how. I just don't understand how it's going to work. So that's a real speed bump, if you like, around change, and it's the people part of it. And typically, I see it in large organizations where there's a highly tenured community.
And is that the same in B2C and B2B, or in your experience, is it different?
Um, I think it's probably the same, though I think it over indexes in B2B, because the pace of change has historically been slower, and the churn that you have around your customer base isn't quite as dramatic as in a B2C environment, because choice isn't as abundant. So I think you can be more passive, or you could be more passive in the B2B world than in the B2C world. But actually what we're seeing now is B2B is now where B2C was maybe 5 years ago, in that the demanding change happens quicker. The the technology constraints that were in place around monolith platforms, they're being eroded all the time. Modern architecture dictates that you can change faster. So the change that we saw in B2C is now just being accelerated into B2B. So you will start to see those organizations where the culture dictates that, yeah, we recognize we've been good, but we need to continue to change. They will flourish. Those where they just have not got that cultural change because they never had to, will start to flounder.
What's driving whether an organization is in that change-driven mindset versus that mindset that everything is okay, but they will flounder? What sets them apart?
Now, I'm biased on this one, but I think it's about recognizing what your customers want and need. So it's being acutely dialed into what they're asking for, how they're using your products and services, and then reacting or responding to what they're asking for, without it being a series of huge programs that require enormous amounts of governance and then ultimately don't end up delivering because the world moves on too quickly. So the role of product management within the modern B2B organization will become increasingly important, where you've got specialist teams dictated to driving either the whole platform or the experience for their clients. And they've got the autonomy and the accountability to make sure that they're delivering for that. I think that world has arrived fairly and squarely into the B2B world, whereas maybe even 5 years ago, it probably wasn't. It was something that people were talking about, and agile was what's this thing? But it being wide sale in all of B2B environments. So that's hit B2C. Sorry, that's hit B2B, and will continue to accelerate it. So this transition from project and program led businesses into a hybrid or a full product led business, I think is a good indicator for how the culture of that business dictates change.
And the way you described it, it sounds so compelling. Why wouldn't every business do it? What stops some businesses making the shift from this program led to this product led approach?
I think to a certain extent, you're back to culture. So the product led environment, I think, leans more heavily on individuals and their accountability. And for some organizations, that's perceived as having a loss of control, because it's agile and people just make stuff up as they go along. Is the perception. It's not the reality that you and I understand. But it's around, I need to see everything. I need to be in charge of everything. I need to have those levers of control under my ownership. That I think is the critical part of that. If you can break that and trust your teams, make sure that they've got the accountability and you've got clear KPIs or OKRs in place, then let the teams deliver. But if you try and stifle them, then the culture will never flourish.
On reflection, what would you say? What's the importance of that customer journey mapping and understanding the entire customer journey?
I think increasingly, whether it's B2B or B2C, it is critical, Steve. You've got to understand the motivations and needs of your customers and the specific segments within your customer base. Because if you have a broad reach, then the motivations and needs are going to be different segment by segment. Therefore, understanding those and then building products and services and designing journeys that meet those needs is critical, because choice is more abundant than ever. Technology dictates that you can move away from providers far faster and far quicker than you ever could previously. You've just got to be really, really good, if not excellent, in order to survive. So having those foundations that are built around the most important people in your business, which is your customer base, is so very important, because you don't understand them. How can you build something that's going to meet their needs?
So we talked a lot about environments where things were buzzing, if you like, and everything, things were happening. Can you give me an example, without naming any names or even the organization was in? Can you give me an example of where things didn't go right, where change didn't happen as the business had hoped? And what's your analysis of why that was the case?
Yeah, I mean, the failed change is not about technology anymore, because technology is pretty good. You can plug it in pretty quickly. It's about people, and it's either about, at a senior level, individuals deciding that the answer is X, and I don't necessarily care what the research says, or I'm not going to do any. I have decided that this is what we're going to do. That's pretty difficult, because you're building to a blueprint defined by a handful or one person. They've got to be right, and you've got no fallback. And the second part is dropping the change in is, again, the easy part. I wouldn't have said this 10 years ago, but technology is easy. It's the people change part of it and adoption. So over-indexing with the people who are going to use the products or services that you've built or the experiences you've designed, to explain what's happened, why it's happened, how it will benefit them, is critical, because they become your advocates. That particularly where you've got the B2B to C environment, because they will promote those services for you. If you can't get them secured and their buy-in, then it will sit on the side of a desk and gather dust, and there'd be nothing wrong with the technology. It was just never used because it was rejected by the people who should be using it.
So if I could press you, it's a question I ask often, based on your experience of delivering successful change, how much is about technology and how much of it has been about people and people's behavior? And I'm going to press you for a percentage.
Right. Okay. Yeah, it's in the 80 or 90% range around people. As I said, rather flippantly, but actually, it's borne out. technology is the easy part. There's so much choice around technology, different providers delivering similar services that meet your needs. The architectural plumbing that used to exist around mainframe applications and the years that you would have to invest to drive change, those days are gone completely. Which means you can change providers pretty quickly and they will work. So that headache, which took a lot of time, a lot of attention, and critically a lot of money from organizations, that's not the issue anymore. It's the people and the culture. So do you understand why we've made this change or why we are making this change? They feel involved in that discussion. Once you've agreed that the change is going to happen, make sure everybody's on board and they are on that straight line strategy to deliver that or to adopt those products. It's so critical.
Looking back, what's one thing that you would do differently or that you wish you'd known earlier?
It's a great question. I think I am collaborative by nature. Therefore, I over-indexed on making sure that people are aware of what the issue is, what we're planning to do, and involving them in some of those co-creation sessions. I think sometimes you just need to be bold and you just need to say the answer is this, and we're going to do it. There is no harm in doing that because there are very few decisions that you can't roll back from, or they're so critical that it's going to kill your business. So I think every now and again, just taking those bold leaps is a good thing to do because it keeps you fresh, it challenges you, but also it injects a level of dynamism into the organization as well to demonstrate that change is possible.
And presumably, to do that, though, you need to be in an organization that nurtures that type of behavior.
Well, yeah, we're back to the culture piece again. It's okay to make mistakes. As I say, that there are very few mistakes or decisions that you can make that turn out to be wrong, that they're going to be so critical that the business will struggle. So yeah, that organization where the culture says, you tried, you failed, but you recognized it and you're going back again with a better solution. It's kind of live testing, if you like.
Live experimentation.
Yeah.
But knowing that it's not fatal. So when we've covered a lot and probably without the risk of repetition, what would be your advice for a young Tim beginning their journey today, trying to deliver change specifically within B2B organizations? We've covered a lot, so we don't need to go over those. But what would be your advice?
There are a couple of things that I think every CX professional should do. One is make sure that you don't reside in only one industry. I've worked in 7, which might be over-indexing it, but actually going and working in other industries, you will learn so much. You don't need to take everything from those industries, but if I think about my career within retail, that slightly frenetic nature that retail has is brilliant, particularly the last quarter of the year. It's fantastic. The problem solving that goes on at that point of the year is superb. Even in financial services, the kind of regulatory nature and having an appreciation for controls and checks and balances, you add all of these skills to your toolkit, which makes you far more rounded. And as a customer experience professional, that's what you are. You have to be rounded. You have to see the challenge or opportunity from all of your stakeholders' eyes, not just the customers.
I have a final question for you. It's a bit of a closing tradition. It's called B2B buzzword bingo. So what's one phrase or a trend in B2B that's overused that you're tired of and you wish would just go away, and why?
The first one is AI. I recognize the need to qualify that. It's AI without context. So I keep thinking we're at the top of the height curve. We're not. We carry on going with AI, and it's I must have something that's AI discussion, which there is no doubt that technology will continue to evolve and deliver great benefits to organizations, but only in the right context and with the right use cases. So I hear a lot of people just screaming for AI, but without framing it. And that's dangerous because you will apply it in the wrong circumstances and it could be disastrous. The second one is the client wants. And again, it's that literal translation of the client or the customer has asked for something, but doesn't know what or why, and we don't understand the benefits or the problem statements. So being very, very clear about why somebody has asked for something is hugely important. And the last one is thought leader. So that one is guaranteed to get my eyes rolling to the back of my head. And there isn't a monopoly around thinking. So I don't know why people think they can be the leader in that space.
Great conversation. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it. It's been nice to get to know you a bit better, to be honest. And thank you for finding the time to talk to me. And it's been great.
That's great, Steve. Thank you again for the invite. Really enjoyed it.
Well, that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then please don't forget to hit subscribe and to share it with your network. And if you'd like to find out more about how Biglight helps its clients discover the needs of their customers and deliver experiences that meet them, then check out our website or follow us on LinkedIn. And I'll see you next time.